Good morning and good afternoon, my dear friend from Hungary, China, and other European countries. We are so glad to hold a very important conference titled The Impact of China's Dual Circulation Strategy on Europe on this special moment. Not only for China's strategy, but also for China-EU relation. It's a very important topic. And also on this special conference, we are very honored to invite director from Institute of European Studies, Feng Zhongping, also director from the Institute of International Affairs and Trade, Ugolodish Marton. And welcome, and we are very glad to that these two distinguished institutes to jointly hold this important event. Thank you everyone. And before that, I would like to invite two important speakers to give us a keynote speech. One is from China for Professor Zhongping Feng, and the other is from the Hungary, the Institute of International Affairs and Trade, Marton Ugolodish. And firstly, please, I would like to invite the director from Hungary, Institute of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Marton Ugolodish. Dear director, please take your floor.
Thank you, Professor Lee. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I do apologize for the background noise, as I just realized that I have a later speaking engagement today and I will have to travel there. So it's an unusual setting this morning. So a few trams might be coming in the way. But it's a great pleasure to be in this conference, and we are honored to work together with the China-CEE Center and also with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences on these affairs. A keynote speech, as they say, has to be short and to the point, so let me make a few remarks to kick the conference off. First of all, we have seen that EU-China relations have been going through very difficult times ever since the comprehensive agreement on investment has been agreed by both parties a few years ago. But as we do see, due to the war in Ukraine and also due to the changes in the world economy and also in great power rivalry, how the European Union can relate to China has changed significantly in the last couple of years. Having said that, we do think that there is a need for cooperation between the EU and China, also as EU member states and China as well. And recognizing China as it is in the EU global strategy, I think there is still an ample room for cooperation, and we should use all these opportunities to bring our countries more closely together. Having China as a systemic rival from the point of view of the European Union sounds good, but it's also problematic for two reasons. First of all, EU member states are far from being united on what China means for the EU and whether it is a rival or not. If you look at the EU-China trade, we do see that it has been growing significantly in the last couple of years. China has replaced the United States as the most important trading partner in many EU member states, including Germany, and therefore it is really hard to reconcile the political talk and propaganda, if you wish, and the economic reality on the other hand. However, due to the changing nature of the European foreign policy, we do sense that the conflictual nature of our relationship is becoming more and more stronger, and we have to stop for a minute and assess that whether this is really in the European Union's interest to treat China as a rival, or we should rather go back to treat China as a partner in the long run. I think this will be an ongoing debate in the future of the EU and also in the upcoming few years. And I do hope that we will have a debate on that which is not emotional but rational and allows us to utilize on all the existing relationship we have and also to have a better and deeper understanding of each other. And for that reason, the event we're having today is, I think, a great opportunity because we can go much deeper than you could go in any newspaper. And for that reason, we very much value the cooperation of all of our Chinese partners who can help us understand that how we can manage these very turbulent times ahead. Also, we do think that we need increased cooperation to overcome existing misunderstandings and also to promote that kind of scientific and academic discussion that can resolve the issues that we are facing. I think on the side of the Institute for Foreign Affairs and Trade, We are ready to play our part in this. For that reason, we are delighted to co-host this conference today. And we're also very happy that many of our partners from other EU member states have accepted our invitation, because we believe that the diversity of views in this matter is crucial, so that our Chinese partners could also deeper understand that what divides the European countries on the EU-China relationship, and also what unites us, and what are our common interests, and what might be those red lines where we have to be aware of each other's sensibilities, and also that how we can navigate these. I think it's a great opportunity that the China-CEE Institute is based in Budapest. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we were very limited of what we could achieve together. But thanks to the leadership of Madam Xiao Winhong, we had a great opportunity to engage each other also in person, even during those times where travel to and from China was impossible. We do hope that China will be able to manage the pandemic very effectively, and we will be able to resume visiting each other in the near future. And as the numbers are going down also in Shanghai, I think these are encouraging signs that will enable us to meet once again in person. And I think if there's one bilateral and multilateral relationship where the added value of the personal meeting is truly important, that is with China, and we can hardly wait to see you again in person. But until then, we very much value the cooperation we have with the China-CEE Institute, and it's great that we have them here so we could have the conversation going in the meantime. Talking a bit about the original topic of the conference, we do see that the dual circulation strategy of China is a great opportunity, and it also gained even more importance as the nature of globalization and the future of globalization is changing. I think it is really interesting to see that how the global West has started to flex its economic muscles when it started to sanction Russia. And it was also very interesting that how decisive measures were taken, like the exclusion of several Russian banks from the SWIFT transfer system, and also those sanctions and possibly secondary sanctions that have been applied vis-a-vis Russia in the past 3 months as the result of the war in Ukraine. We do understand that our Chinese partners are watching and listening very carefully that how these sanctions work and what kind of impacts they might have on China. And we do sense that today it is Russia, but tomorrow it can be another country as well. And in order to facilitate and alleviate and understand the risks which are involved in that and what this means to globalization, what this means to the future of the European economy, which is likely to go into a crisis as a result of the sanctions we have been employing against Russia, and what this might mean if applied to another country, to globalization and also to China-EU trade, I think is a crucial topic that we have to understand, because before either of the sides would do something unexpected and unusual, and something of which we are not completely aware of when it comes to the full economic outcomes and fallouts of these actions. And looking at the European side, I do have the feeling at times that we are acting before we would be thinking. And when it comes to such a crucial economic relationship that we have with China, I think this would be a fatal mistake to act before we think, because that might result in so many unintended consequences that might be completely impossible to manage in the long run, and that could ruin our economies very quickly. We have to avoid this. And in order to avoid that, I think we need increased cooperation, increased communication, both in political and think tank levels. And today, I think we can get this ball rolling. And for that reason, of course, once again, we're grateful that we were able to put this call together. The final comment that I would like to make is that obviously the EU and China has differences also in our economic cooperation. On both sides, we see that the initial expectations of deep cooperation have not been met, whether it comes to European access to the Chinese domestic market or whether it comes to Chinese investment in Europe, which has been put under additional scrutiny recently because of political reasons. So I do think that both sides have a bit of a homework to do here. But what is achievable, what is doable, and what is feasible, and what is good for our economies are questions that we have to answer first before we start to act. And to keep the discussion and also our conversation rational and as much free from emotions as possible, I think these kind of think tank engagements are very important. And with that, I would also like to close my opening remarks. And I will unfortunately have to cut my video because we will have to get on the road, but we will be here listening all the time. And of course, my colleagues will be leading the conversation. My deputy director will participate in the closing remarks. Once again, thank you very much for having us. And we're very much looking forward to the outcomes of the talks today. And it would be also great to channel in the findings to both of the decision makers in both China and the European Union to see that what we can do together under these very uncertain circumstances. And as the Chinese saying goes, like, may you live in interesting times. I think we actually do live in interesting times these days. So we have a lot to do together, but I think together we can achieve our goals in a way which is beneficial for both of our countries. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you for Director Martin Uglodi's very kindly, very timely comment. And also, I think you give a high value and a high expectation towards this think tank forum. As one of the organizer from Hungary, also give a high remarks on Budapest-based China-CEE Institute as another organizer of this event for this cooperation. We also hope that in the future, the China-CEE Institute will be a bridge to bridge the cooperation between China and Hungary, China and Europe. Also, I hear your very insightful comment on China-EU trade, China-EU relations, or other important things on sections on the Ukraine crisis and other. I think it's also very timely and very, very have much common with each other between China and Hungary on this issue, on this regard. So I hope just based on our very concrete cooperation between China-CEE Institute and Hungary Institute for International Affairs and Trade, this forum will be successful to discuss something, to interaction with each other, with both think tanks to find the new solutions, new the thinking minding to promote the good cooperation, closer cooperation with each other. Thank you, Martin. Thank you again, Director. Then we would like to invite the Director of Institute of European Studies, CAS, and the President of China-CEE Institute, Dr. Feng Zhongping, to give your remarks or keynote speech. Please.
Okay. Thank you so much, Zhou Kui. I want to say hello to all the participants, to our Hungary colleagues, European colleagues, and our Chinese colleagues for participating today's seminar. It's always a great pleasure to work with the Hungary Institute for Foreign Affairs and Trade. As the director has just mentioned, we have a lot of good reasons to sit down, to talk, think before act, to have more deep reflections about the situation. Then we can make some appropriate approaches, decisions. Today's topic, Liu Zhukui has just mentioned, is very important. For our European think tanks friends to understand Chinese economic strategy, or maybe someone could say this is the new strategy, economic strategy. What does this mean for Europe, for the world? So I think it's an important topic. China and European Union are two of the three biggest economy in the world. United States, Europe, European Union, China are the three biggest economies. So we need to understand better about each other's approach, political approach, economic approach, trade policies. I'm not an economist, but I, like the director Martin, I will take this opportunity to say a few words about China-European relations. Before I'm going to China-European relations. I would also start by explain, what I say, the Ukraine crisis, and what is the impact of this already 3 months long. I suddenly realized tomorrow it will be 100 days. So today is 99 days of this Ukraine-Russia conflict, almost 100 days. What this is going to have, the impact is probably it's very clear, but we still don't know when it will end, how, and the impact is huge. But it probably will be more serious than we think today. My own assessment, this conflict is going to last for quite a long time, because either Russia, either Moscow or Ukraine, let me put it in this way, Ukraine, behind the Ukraine, Europeans, Americans, are supplying weapons, military, economic aid, support. So either side is willing to accept the feeling of the conflict. At the same time, either side can easily win the war. Russia made a serious mistake at the very beginning. It thought it could have a quick war, 2 days, 3 days, because in 2008, we saw the 5 days George war. So maximum is a week, probably. This has proved to be a totally, raw calculation. So this means that the conflict will not end in a short period of time. China and many European countries want Russia and Ukraine to end the conflict through negotiations as soon as possible. I followed French President Macron's telephone call, new Chancellor of Germany's telephone call with Russia counterpart. They made 80 minutes, more than an hour telephone discussion. The French-German message is very clear. They want to, say the quick solution, quick end of this war. But as I have just argued, both Ukraine and Russia is ready to make compromise now. It's different from at the very beginning. They have already had a 5 round of negotiations. The last one was in Turkey. This is no longer an option at the moment. Both sides. The increasing hostility between Moscow and the West will split Europe again. I'm afraid, people are talking about the eye curtain. It's different from the Cold War we saw 30 years ago, but similar split. It sounds like it's going back, come back. Bring the Europe back to the Cold War time. The confrontation between Russia and the West on the new Cold War in Europe will have a significant impact, not just in Europe, but also in the whole world. The multilateralism and the global governance are facing serious challenges, to put in a mild way. Economic globalization will be seriously affected too. The economic Dr. Kissinger, former US Secretary of State, recently in a speech at Davos, which a lot of people have noticed already, warned that the continuation of the Ukraine conflict will be catastrophic. He urged that Russia and Ukraine to use the 2-month window opportunity to cease the war. It's interesting, he said the two sides have only got 2 months. In 2 months' time, he said the two sides must to conclude the conflict. Europe is a very important partner for China, as we are going to talk this afternoon or this morning. From 2004, when the EU first expanded eastward, to 2019, the EU had been China's largest trading partner, while China had been the second largest trading partner for the European Union. So we have 19 years continuously as each other's biggest trade power. In 2020, China overtook the United States, becoming the EU's most important trading partner for the first time. Apart from economic ties, China and the EU also worked closely to address climate crisis and other global challenges. And at present, as the Director Martin mentioned, many European countries, our relations is facing many challenges. Many European countries adopt I call diversified approach to China, regarding China as a partner, competitor, and a systemic rival. I'll give you 2 examples. After the 2021 German final election, the coalition government published a bi-social coalition agreement published by Social Democrats, Greece, and Free Democrats that Germany was to develop our relations with China in the dimensions of partnership, shaping competition, and system rivalry. I quote the agreement made by this three-party coalition. The French government took a similar approach in an interview in June last year. The French foreign minister made a statement as he said, France considered China as a partner, competitor, and rival. Based on this new perception of China, in recent years, we recognized, the EU as a whole has significantly increased its awareness of competition. And at the same time, the EU is more willing to take a third line with China in terms of ideology, including domestic governance model and global political influence. In short, the new perception of China makes the EU's China policy more focused on competition. The United States has a very important influence, I'm afraid, on the foreign policy of European countries. Since the end of the Cold War, Europe and the US have experienced many challenges in maintaining the allies. The war against Iraq in 2003 and Trump's 4 years in the White House made the transatlantic relations very difficult. After Joe Biden took office in 2021, he declared that America is back and the EU-US relations have been improved. The US and Europe have increased coordination in their China policy. The two sides have strengthened the high-level dialogue mechanism related to China and established US-EU Trade and Technology Council, so-called TTC, aimed at targeting China. Since the outbreak of Russia-Ukraine conflicts, the negative views about China have increased in Europe. In April, the European Parliament held a discussion on China-European relations. One could clearly say I could even say anti-China sentiment. As the two of the three largest economies in the world, both China and Europe have gained considerable benefits from decades of economic and trade cooperation in the past. The next few years, I think, will be extremely crucial to the world landscape, especially to relations among the major powers. China and the EU need to adapt to the new situation of increasing competitiveness in their relations, and also exploit a new pragmatic, rational relationship model. The two sides should actively think cooperation on green development and the digital economy. At the same time, they also have responsibility to strengthen exchanges and cooperation to prevent the reappearance of a confrontational pattern between the world's major powers. Let me try to highlight my argument. I think it's against this background. I think China-Hungary relations is becoming more important. The EU has a growing desire to become an independent global player, which will free it from dependence on other powers. Currently, the EU is undergoing two major transformations. The first is economic transformation, which includes both the green and digital transformations. And the second, also being carried out by the EU, is a diplomatic transformation. China supports the EU to become an independent player in the world. During Donald Trump's 4-year period, the conflicts between Europe and the United States in global governance and other aspects were prominent. What the Trump administration did internationally, including withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, the Iran nuclear agreement, and other international agreements, runs counter to the principles and positions that the European adherence to. It has become increasingly difficult for Europe to continue to rely on the United States. China's mainstream view of China is that European countries and the EU are its important partner. There are important opportunities for cooperations with each other. As China's economic growth remains strong and the Chinese market continues to expand, China and Europe have great potential for cooperation. For both China and EU, the next most important thing is to find ways to prepare a suitable atmosphere and environment to break the current deadlock and return the approval process of the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment, CAI, to normal track. My short conclusion is that a stable China-EU relations is in the interest of both China and Europe. China and Hungary needs continuously to seek common interests and expand China-European cooperation. By working together, China and Hungary could play a role of pioneer for EU's relations with China. I stop here. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for President, Director, Dr. Feng Zhongping, to give us a very thoughtful, insightful keynote speech. And I sincerely think that these comments and analysis are very constructive. He just make analysis that at different levels, from the conflicts itself, China-EU relations, China-Hungary relations, also the relation between great powers, including USA, EU, and China. And for some judgment, I'm really harvest a lot, something like the conflict itself will surely become a long-lasting conflict between two sides, Russia and Ukraine. Also, these conflicts has dramatically influenced the relations between China and EU. Also, the trilateral relation between USA, EU, and China. Also, these conflicts has imposed some negative, especially the nature of competitiveness between China and the EU. Also, we can see among the China, EU, and the US, we can see more and more competitiveness nature of these important great powers. But anyway, Professor Feng gave his forward-looking analysis that in the future, we should have a constructive, positive interaction with each other between China, EU, between China and Hungary, because they are very important to promote a very stable, well-governed world in the future. Thank you for Professor Feng's very constructive comment. Next, I just got the information from the organizer. Please kindly open your video or elevator to take a picture together for this forum. Thank you for your support. Everyone, every participant. Yes. Okay. Now could not find the director Martin Ugalodish yet. Wait for a while. Wait for a while. Director Martin, can you?
I think he thought he's doing something else. Yeah.
Okay. Then okay. Let's just take pictures together. Please show your smile to the screen. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Then we will step the next section on the panel 1 discussion. On this panel discussion, we are very honored to invite 4 top or very distinguished researchers from China, Europe, Hungary, especially Hungary and Brussels. Brussels. They are all very well known on that research on trade, investment, and also another important economic topics. So on this 1 hour discussions, we have 4 panelists. So you can calculate your time based on your topic. Then we have 15 minutes Q&A interaction, Q&A sections. So firstly, we would like to invite Alicia Garcia Herrero, Chief Economist for Asia Pacific at Netcase, Senior Research Fellow at the Brussels-based European think tank, Bruegel, and a non-resident Senior Research Fellow at the East Asia Institute of the National University, Singapore. Adjunct Professor at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I think it has the panelists have a rich background on the different academic research and university. Alicia, please take your floor. I'm very honored to listen to your speech.
Thank you so much. First of all, it's a pleasure to share with you, and I'm sure we'll have a rich discussion. I feel a little bit uneasy to be first because I was 2 minutes late. I had client meeting. My life is divided between the markets and academics, so it's always very hard to be kind of on time everywhere. But I really treasure the possibility to discuss more about key issues such as dual circulation for Europe and China. I wrote a piece. I'm going to basically focus on a piece I wrote for China Leadership Monitor, whose title is really "What is dual circulation really?" And even if I spend literally a month researching, I'm still not 100% sure. And I think, well, maybe you know, but I think many Western analysts don't really know exactly what it is. But in that piece, what my main kind of idea was to say that this is just part of a puzzle, part of a galaxy of theories or applied theories, I would say, of how China should run its economy. And that includes in order of appearance, first, the Belt and Road Initiative, which to me is kind of I don't like the word backyard, but you know what I mean, like the space, let's put it this way, the space of the second circulation, export. So the space for the second circulation in a world, because all of these, as I said, set of theories come to, I think, to the Chinese leadership mindset, at least from my perspective, because of the state of mind, which is the West wants to contain China. So I need to react to this threat. And the best reaction I can do is first to create an area of, some people like the word influence, but I would say space. I would just say space to operate. And that's that BRI and that second circulation. That's the first idea. The second idea, again, in order of appearance, is of course Made in China 2025, which is to do what in this space? To do better, basically to move up the ladder, because I can't, quote unquote, dominate or feel comfortable in that space if I'm still dependent and I have bottlenecks in certain technologies. So I need to do this too. I need to move up the ladder and avoid technological dependence. So that's the second one. The third is indeed dual circulation, and that brings together the fact that when dual circulation was first in appearance in the leadership discourse, China by then in PPP terms was the biggest economy in the world. So the domestic market, by all means and purposes, was big enough to think ethnocentrically, as big economies do think, including the US, for obvious reasons. So in that regard, that first circulation, i.e. the domestic market, is the center of dual circulation, without avoiding, though, the second export market and what it means, BRI, and then the technical ability to do both, the Made in China 2025. And as if this were not enough, I think only a couple of years later, and this brings us to nearly very close to today, there is this realization, and maybe the pandemic made it more obvious, that you can only have a domestic market if you have robust support for consumption, meaning that you have a very large middle class, not enough to have middle class, but that income is well distributed, because you need that kind of backbone for the first circulation. And that's, of course, common prosperity. So that's kind of, for me, now, and I don't want to get into geopolitics because I'm a humble economist, but I think if you ask me what is the next concept in this galaxy, to me is global security initiative, because it means that even if you try to do all of this, you create your own domestic market, dual circulation, you push for your external market, BRI, you move up the ladder, you don't depend technologically, great. You distribute income better, all great. But if you don't have security, you still are under threat. So, I think that's kind of the next concept to me that comes in the light of all of these concepts, and for which dual circulation is very important. But I don't think it's the only concept. I think it needs to be read as part of a constellation of ideas. And that's all I wanted to say. I hope it helps.
Thank you for Alicia's very short but very constructive comments on our dual circulation strategy. Often I try to understand your logic on the first circulation, domestic market, and the second circulation. I mean the world market. This logic in China, we often have a very perfect analysis that they are interaction with each other very efficiently. But from your analysis, you think that it's not enough, and the domestic market we also have to face a lot of problems.
Let me clarify, since I know I was brief. First of all, because I don't want to bore the listeners with my comments, so I prefer to be brief and come back. But I didn't mean to say that, just to clarify, first of all, when you look at Chinese inflation today, you can see that the domestic market and the external market are not so interrelated as you may think. Export price inflation is nearly 4 times, if not more, actually 5 times CPI. In no country in the world you see that. It's not, I mean, we have to realize that there's also export breaks. I mean, it's not such a interrelated, and I think that also helps understand the concept of dual circulation for we Europeans, because we don't think this way. But I think part of the reason is that the pricing is different. The pricing is different. And for a long time, it was the opposite. Export prices were below CPI in China for a long time. This has changed. So I just wanted to clarify. I know I finished, but I will be happy to go back to the point of how Europeans see this, because I didn't cover that point for the benefit of having a long discussion. I mean, having others speak, but I can come back to that later.
Okay. Thank you for Professor Alicia. Very timely comment for this issue. We hope that later we have enough time to promote the interaction with each other, and we will hope that there are more questions for your comments. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you. And next, we would like to invite my colleague, also the executive president of China-CEE Institute. Now he is also the deputy director of the Institute European Study class, Dr. Chen Xin, to give his comment. And his topic is strategy adjustment of the EU trade policy and the impact for China's economy. Dr. Chen, please take your floor.
Thank you, Professor Liu, and good afternoon, dear colleagues in Europe. Good morning, dear colleagues in Europe, and good afternoon, dear colleagues in China. It is my great honor to participate in this seminar, and it is also a very good opportunity to see the old friends here again. For example, hello, Alicia. I think our first meeting maybe some 10 years ago in Beijing Kempinski Hotel. So it's a long time. And it shows that how long you had in doing research on China studies, especially on Chinese economy. It is very good to have the same panel with you, and also with the other colleagues. For example, Professor Xu is also the Deputy Director of the World Economy and the Politics of the Cash. My talk today, I'm thinking about I'm not the expert on the China's economy. And I think in this panel, we have the Chinese scholars, they will present how it's about dual circulation. My start point is try to make a background research on how the dual circulation could formulated, or why this concept had been raised in the recent time. As Alicia had already mentioned, that export is one of the strong engine of the Chinese economy. That means that the world market is very important for China. And also in the opening remarks of Professor Feng, also the Mr. Oglushti, they also mentioned that Europe is one of the China's biggest trading partner. So for a long time, the biggest trading partner, and in the recent 2 years becomes the second one. The ASEAN countries took the first place. So anyhow, it means how important Europe or the EU market it is for China, and how important such kind of cooperation with Europe is important also for China. So my talk would be divided into two parts. The first is being on the strategic adjustments of EU, and the second part is on what is the implications for the Chinese or on the Chinese economy. As we know that at the EU side, real strategic adjustments had been already taken place. It maybe take a little bit longer if we're back to see in the 2017, in the January 31, when at that time the Council, European Council, President of European Council, Donald Tusk, had sent a letter to 27 leaders of EU, and it declares that, it has been warned that there were 3 external threats at the time, as the Tusk thinks: United States, Russia, and China. So it means at that time when the Young Committee or Young Commission, they call themselves Political Commission, and then in present Commission, von der Leyen Commission, they call themselves Geopolitical Commission. For both of the commission, they are thinking more about the politics, geopolitics, power games, less than the prosperity, the economic development. So it may cause their attention. So that means even in 2017, for the EU leaders, they have already raised the 3 threats. United States, they have at that time, Donald Trump was the president. So, and now the Biden. So the situation had been changed. And in the recent 2 years, how fast we can see the development between EU and US. And the second, Russia, there is a conflict just at the neighbor of the EU. So Ukraine, Russia. Just as Professor Feng had mentioned. And China, how EU treat China. So there is a question about self-fulfilling prophecy. So it is a very interesting question. So if you try to set an enemy and then you try to let the target to be an enemy, then it could be the enemy. But if you are not on this logic, you try to develop a relationship with the partners and peacefully, so then that would be another scenario. So based on the changes of the perception, And the keywords of the EU on China had also been changed. So in the old years, we used to call competition, cooperation, partnership. And in the 2019, the keywords tend to be three: the competitor, economic competitor, negotiator, or the partnership for the negotiation, and but not last but not least, the systemic rival. And these keywords had been successfully transformed to US when 1 year ago, the first meeting had been settled after the Biden administration took into the office, and the leaders met in Brussels. And after that, the US administration used the same three keywords toward China. So this is the change of the keywords. And also there is a dimension for the analysis on the EU trade policy. I took an example of the two. One is on the 2015, there was a trade policy review. And the other is the last year, the trade policy review. And in both the policy review, trade policy review, they took 4 challenges. In the 2015, they took 4 challenges such as global value chain, the digital revolution, the challenge of the emerging economics, and the mega trade agreements. At that time, they are discussing on the TPP and the TDIP. And in the last year, 2021, in the EU's trade policy review, they raised another 4 challenges. There are some similarities comparing with the 2015, but there are some special, unique challenge. So the first one is globalization and the technological development. The second is digital transformation. The third is climate change. And the fourth is China. So China has becoming the biggest challenge of the EU trade policy at the country level. So this is a picture from the EU DG Trade website, and China has a separate place as a country among the other topics. So for such kind of strategic adjustment, there are certainly the spillover effects, either on the internal policies of EU or on the external strategies. So on the internal policies of the EU, there are already some policy adjustments had been taken place. The first is the screening, the rapid regulation on the screening of the FDI. This already had been finished and implemented. And this is on the investment policy. And the second is on the competition policy, which is core of the EU internal market. So they are working on a new regulation on the foreign subsidy. And the new, also they are working on towards a new tool that is due diligence on supply chain. So these are the effects of the internal policies. No words mentioned on China, but the target is on China. And also there are spillover effects on external strategies. So as Professor Dr. Feng had mentioned that the EU and the US had established the TDC, Trade and Technology Committee. And it is a agenda setting format and trying to make more regulation. And also they have the common target. So I do not mention here. And besides of this, also EU had published or announced 2 strategic papers or documents. One is on the Indo-Pacific strategy. So they talked about a lot in the strategy, but in my focus or in my understanding, I think the main focus is on the ASEAN. So how to further develop the economic trade relationship with the ASEAN countries. And also the latest document is on the global gateway. It is dealing with the connectivity. And in my understanding, maybe the most interesting point is on Africa. So all of these external strategies, they do not mention China, but China is somehow in it. So for such kind of strategic adjustment of the EU, certainly there are some impacts for the Chinese economy or for the China-EU relations. So as I mentioned, China, the EU is the biggest trading partner of China. So if the external market is stable, foreseeable, then the partner will have more opportunity and surely they will invest more. If the partner, if the market is unstable or unclear, then it would have some, in some extent, there are some adjustments should be had taken. And nowadays, the China-EU relations, especially the trade and economic relations, had turned into the complexity. So in the early days, more than 50 years ago, we only had the simple trade relations. But nowadays, the global value chain, the global supply chain had been deeply embedded in the bilateral relations and also have the impact beyond. And at the same time, the dimensions from trade to multi-dimensions. Now we have the investments, we have the financial corporations, we have the science and technology corporations. So we have more dimensions, multi-dimensions in such kind of relationship. And also it is far beyond from the bilateral to the multilateral. So we have the WTO platform and well, we have the other cooperation platform in the world. So it is turned to the bilateral to multilateral. And in this complexity, it is not simple to say one policy would have impact. It will have spillover impacts and it will have the connections with each other among different policies and even among different partners. So for Chinese policy response, first and the most important is consistently on reform and opening up policy. And this is the core point of our latest 40 years development. And I think China will continuously go on this road and reform and opening up. The second is we still promote the globalization because we think for the globalization, it is a very good tool for stability and peaceful development. And also it is a very useful path for the prosperity of the different partners in the cooperation. And at the same time, we also implement some regional initiatives like the RCEP, RCEP, and also preparing for the CPTPP. And from the Chinese side, our policy toward the EU is not changed. We're still working on the 4 partnerships. So, and we think it is the common ground, and also it is a peaceful process and towards the prosperity for the both sides. And the challenges and opportunities, I think both sides we have and we need to explore. For the EU side, you have the next generation EU, which means massive investment and also the dual transformation for the green and digital. And for the China, we have the dual circulation policy. We not only explore the world market, external market, but also we would like to enhance our internal market as the Chinese economy, the size of the Chinese economy, and also the huge potential for the further development. And between China and the EU, we had established 2 new partnerships, green and digital, and the counterparts are working on these 2 fields. And last but not least, the question of the CAI, Comprehensive Agreement on Investment. So it is a very interesting issue. It is an economic issue, but now it turns to the political decision. So in some extent, if we can reach on this or implement this agreement, it will facilitate more investments, leads to the prosperity for the both sides. Maybe I talked too long and I'm looking forward for the further discussion. Thank you very much for the patience. Thank you.
Thank you for the Dr. Chen, President Chen, for his very comprehensive analysis. I think he gave a very successful summary of the EU trade and investment instrument in the past towards the world and especially towards China. On his analysis, he thinks that there are three instruments which has been used or been built, namely the modification of anti-dumping regulation in trade policy, the legislation on FDI screen in investment policy, also the legislation proposal on foreign subsidy in competition policy. These are very important change for the trade investment or other policies. He also mentioned two important new instruments on due diligence of supply chain and anti-coercion are on the way. At the same time, EU announced its strategic papers on Indo-Pacific framework, global gateway, and the strategic compass. So all these are very new, but have a very concrete measures and policy instrument to promote its policy, not only in trade, but also investment and the other policy area. China is one of the top trading partner and active investor of the EU, and China has a wide range of cooperation opportunity around the world. So all this strategic adjustment from the EU has implications for China's economy. Lastly, Dr. Chen gave a very short analysis on China's response to this new trade and investment adjustment. I think all these proposals are very constructive. Thank you for Professor Chen, your very comprehensive analysis. Next, we would like to invite our another old friend, Victor Esthai. His Chinese name is Hu Qingjian. Did you change your name? So who is from the Senior Research Fellow of the Hungary Institute for Foreign Affairs and Trade. Professor Hu Qingjian, please take your floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone in China, and good morning in the European side. The title of my presentation is going to be the political aspect of China's dual circulation strategy, and I have to confess that originally I wanted to speak something else. So I originally wanted to talk about the German centrist European value chains and how the dual circulation strategy can affect it. But I was participating in organizing the conference, and when I was contacting to our European colleagues, I have to see that many refuses the participation because they said dual circulation strategy is so political. And I was a bit surprised at the beginning because I said, oh, well, we originally wanted to focus really on an economic topic, so political aspect is important, but why to talk about this? So this made me to change my mind and to talk about this in this regard. The research questions I'm going to raise today is that what is the political perception of dual circulation strategy within the European Union, and what could be the ongoing and possible reactions, and how do these affect European-Chinese relations? And in this regard, I have to also say that there will be reflection on Alicia's and also on Chen's presentations. So I hope this can also generate or continue the debate. When I was investigating the perception of the dual circulation strategy, I decided to focus on the think tanks because they are special institutions to influence decision makers. But on other point of view, in Europe, these are very relevant institutions to explain what is happening in China. So all the Chinese concepts are going through their lens, and how do they narrate it to the wider public is also relevant. So from this point of view, in the last 2 weeks, I read all the papers published by many of the core think tanks within Europe. There are some others, but I made a short list of them. And I did not focus on how do they try so I did not focus on the definition of dual circulation and how, and I did not also and I did not care too much on what are the challenges and opportunities they identified, but I was really looking for how do they narrating the dual circulation strategy, because this would tell the most to us how it is seen from a political angle, this dual circulation strategy in Europe. So I could find three different types of narrations. First, that the dual circulation strategy, the reason is to decouple from the world. So some of the think tanks argue that it's a protectionist step, and this will cut off China from the globalization. This was, of course, the least influential opinion on dual circulation strategy, but there were two others. One is to reducing dependence in the key technologies and decoupling on its own terms. And the third one is a new approach towards globalization, I mean, rising geopolitical fractions. So there was the three major narration of what is happening in China and what is the dual circulation strategy. And if we investigate all these three narrations, I think it goes back to that framework, what we have to discuss today, and that is connectivity. So if you read through these three narrations, somehow all connects to connectivity. And what is connectivity? According to the mainstream approach, they are arguing that under the US hegemony, globalization was an opportunity.
Sorry, Victor, are you using your PowerPoint? I didn't see any change of your PowerPoint.
Really? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Is it okay now? Can you see it or?
Yes, now it's changed. But could you make the picture more more broader or?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it okay now?
Yes, you can.
Okay, fine. Okay. So the major approach behind these three narrations are connectivity, and connectivity was going back to the notion that under the US hegemony, globalization was an opportunity for countries to prosper. However, as a result of growing multipolarization, great power competition has intensified. So interconnected with each other become a challenge. So this goes back to the ideal, which was highlighted also by Alicia, that this resulted the securitization of economic relations in many aspects. This became a major ideal. So, and in this regard, Europe did not see itself as a passive actor, but many argued that this interconnected world provides Europe also an opportunity. This was clearly articulated by this book, which I just put it on my slide, The Connectivity Wars, published in 2016, which argued that EU as an economic superpower, if we accept it, has an ability to influence other actors' behavior in international arena, because we are giving away using military as a tool to change other actors' behavior. So economy and connectivity is a useful tool, and in this regard, EU is an active superpower. So if we accept that we live in an era of connectivity, it's also possible to identify the objective of a connectivity strategy is to create and reduce critical asymmetric dependencies. And what could be the tools? Gain relative power by unifying regional markets and deepening integration in inter-regional cooperation, diversify sources of import as much as possible, and increase unilateral dependency. Of course, this does not argue that we have to cut the ties, so it's not talking about decoupling, but somehow kind of selective decoupling possible, and to diversify your sources of import. And then also creation of international institutions are relevant, and infrastructure development, which are creating hubs, and great powers or major actors should have a hub position within these networks. And they also argue that in extreme cases, connectivity can be seen as a warfare. And if we think about the Russian war in Ukraine, this is quite clear. EU is really accepting this idea that economic tool can be used as a warfare. So my argument is that this concept of connectivity is highly influencing the decision makers in Europe and also the think tanks. So if they accept that we live in the age of connectivity, they will also see the dual circulation strategy through this lens. And that is the case, actually, that dual circulation seems to be a very logical strategy from this connectivity strategy point of view, because it's strengthening the domestic market, eliminate bottlenecks, cut some of the core dependencies, and also creating spaces, as Alicia argued, with the Belt and Road Initiative, somehow a region which is under the asymmetric dependency on China. So if this is accepted in Europe, that this is somehow fit well into this connectivity approach, we have to understand that the really economic relationship with China also will go through the security lens. And this results ongoing and possible reactions, which is quite easy to identify. And this will reflect also on Professor Chen's talking points. First, there will be a very big push to map the critical dependencies from China. And this is an ongoing process as well. Many think tanks also participating in this process. And we also see that if this is happening, the objective is, of course, to slowly reduce the dependencies. So I do not say that European aim is to decouple from China, but it's a selective decoupling. It's quite possible, especially in the field of technology and some other, how we call it in some critical aspects of economic relations. Second, subsidies on supply chain diversification is ongoing also somehow, but this can be strengthened. Yeah, it's quite clear for everyone. Stronger investment screening to protect technology. So we already have the mechanism. This was also argued and then pointed out by Professor Chen, but this can be more strict. The EU level investment in key and critical technologies is somehow quite possible reaction. And if there will be no enough resources, it's quite possible also to share the cost with other partners, especially the United States and some other so-called line-minded nations. And this is also very crucial in the standard setting procedures as well. So this is somehow can be identified as a possible reaction. So of course, there are some other lesser important elements, more unified EU action next to markets to rescue the raw materials and the basic needs of its economy. As we have some steps in this direction, also regarding the Russian-Ukrainian war, and also the EU joint actions to secure European interest in the Chinese market as well as quite a possible reaction. And then I will jump to the conclusion. So whether this response can be applied successfully, and can this be also used to create a kind of a coherent strategy, it depends on several factors. And then, to be frank, I'm very skeptical about these factors. First is that whether it is possible to have a united or unified European response. There are 27 member states, so it's always very hard to find the common ground and to somehow cope with the different interests of the individual countries. And many think tank and many researchers argues that the Russian-Ukrainian war is a good example of this because EU shows that it can act together, but I'm still skeptical. So let's wait the end of this war. So, and of course, the economic role of China is much bigger within the global economic system. Second, any decoupling as an element of connectivity strategy must have a cost, and that's a problem. So it's easy to talk about, but when you pay the cost, is very problematic. And the other issue is that because these economic connectivities are extremely complex, it's very hard to predict what will be the real cost and what will be the consequences of each step. So it seems easy to have a selective decoupling, but it cannot be so selective due to the complex integration of global economy. Second, if we start to have this kind of selective decoupling introduce a strategy against each other. So this can easily lead to a tit for tat situation. And in this regard, it will be extremely hard to define what is critical dependency. So that's also very, very crucial, that it has the limitations, how we can define a critical dependency. So many also argues that the Russian-Ukrainian war will be a major example in the head of the decision makers of Europe, and also the academia or those researchers who are thinking in this regard. So how can these connectivity used as a weapon, and what could be the consequences? What could be the complex result of this war? And again, here I also have to emphasize that we don't really understand the cost of having this kind of strategy or using this kind of tools as a weapon. So I would say that there is a chance that the major countries will introduce individual dual circulation strategies, but this will have very serious consequences on the global economy, and this will lead to a new phase of globalization, the regionalization of globalization, and this will be something new. We cannot only think the old methods in this regard. So this will create a new period in our history. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions as well.
Okay, thank you for Victor. A very interesting analysis. Despite we didn't see very clearly about the point, because it often stands still for all the time. So, but no problem. We always harvest a lot from your analysis. That this topic is on a narrative analysis. I think it's a very important perspective. You know that we also read a lot of policy papers, think tank research results from the website. I'm also often very confused or frightened by the analysis that the decoupling is coming, the war and the Cold War is happening, and the competition is very, very comprehensive in every area. So I'm very frightened to these comments from the think tanks in Europe. But now Victor gave a very clear analysis that from the rhetoric or the narrative analysis, we find some key analysis instrument, something like the connectivity, or also the technology analysis is very, very useful. But the conclusion is very important, and because this is a very rational analysis that whether the EU could have one voice on some key issues, or you see the unified EU's response towards China, towards some key policy area. Often we hear that you give us a new point that maybe you would take a selective decoupling policy towards China, especially for the technology or the other. So I think all these analysis, just based on the rational analysis from your experience, is very useful to us. We will looking forward to more and more very concrete analysis from your side. Thank you, Victor. And next, we will invite the last speakers. He's also my class colleague, but he's very young. Also the Deputy Director General of the Institute of World Economics and Politics, Xu Qiyuan. Let's check his topic. He will give us his speech on 3 major changes of foreign companies' strategy in China. Dr. Xu, please take the floor.
Thank you, Zokui. I changed my mind after I heard the first 3 panelists, and I want to make just comments, give some replies to Alicia, because we know the dual circulation is the fundamental issue we talk about today. If we want to make clear what kind of impact of this dual circulation strategy, what's its impact on EU countries, we should understand it more accurately and more in a more broad way and accurately. I don't mean that Alicia is wrong. I think you are partly right, and your conclusion is quite popular and representative for the foreigners to understand dual circulation. And I know you well, actually, although it's the first time I meet you on the online meeting. Jianwei, my friends, he mentioned a lot of time for your research and appreciates for your many papers and columns. Actually, I'm also visited Bruegel in 2013, but we have no time overlaps. It's a pity. We can communicate later for a lot. And here I want to make it clear for dual circulation, because I have write in Chinese for a long paper, and it's quite popular in Chinese. The readers are like tens of thousands people. Actually, first of all, as an economist, I don't like such kind of word, dual circulation. It's not a term of in economic textbook. We cannot find it. It's quite complicated. As you have mentioned, it's a puzzle. It's a puzzling for many people, even in China. But for the politician, for the government, they like such kind of term because it's kind of basket. You can put many kinds of thoughts into this basket. And what kind of basket it is? I think it's at least including the supply side consideration and also demand side, and even income distribution in these three dimensions. To understand clear, we should go back to 2015 and 16. At that time, supply side reforms are very popular in China. Actually, China and the Western countries, we draw completely different lessons from the financial crisis in 2008. You know, China have make a great decision to carry out 4 trillion yuan stimulus in 2009. But the result is overcapacity, inflation, and many other issues. So for the central government, they think we should draw the lessons and we should be more cautious for the macroeconomy policy. And in this way, you find when the pandemic become very serious, actually, Chinese are still very cautious about to lose the monetary and the fiscal policy. Actually, by the end of 2020, in November, I think, in 2020, the monetary policy you can find is tightened. In November 2020, you can check the data for total social financing, M2 growth rate, and the RMB loans. The growth rate peak at the November 2020 and then declines. But you know, for the Western countries, for the Federal Reserve Board, it continues to lose even by the end of last year. And for fiscal policy, in last year, we calculate the indicator like generalized fiscal expenditure and income. You will find the fiscal expenditure decrease substantially comparing with the year before. And for the fiscal revenue, it's generalized. Its fiscal revenue increase a lot, goes rapidly. That means the fiscal policy is also tightened. So it goes completely different way for China and the Western countries. And against this background, some of the people and economists, they believe we are doing something wrong. We go to the supply side reforms too far away, such as my colleague, Professor Yongding Yu. Professor Yu, I think you know him probably. And also for some of the ministries like NDRC, they think we should make something different. We should not, if we just emphasize on the supply side, it's not right. We should also emphasize on the supply side we should make some policies to lose or to stimulate the demand side. But again, in the year of 2018 and 19, it's politically incorrect to emphasize expanded demand. And what is political right is only to emphasize supply side reforms. So by the end of 2019, NDRC, when they talk about, the annual, every year, by the end of every year, we will talk about to make a document, very important. It is Central Government Economic Work Conference. In this conference, NDRC, the boss, the governor of the NDRC, they raise such kind of slogan that we should make the domestic market more strong and more large. Actually, it's another kind to express we should stimulate the demand, although it seems not exactly the same, but they want to emphasize the domestic demand is very important to China's economy, not the external. And that's why it's the first time such kind of idea was carried out, was announced. And then in 2020, when we got heavily shocked by the pandemic, China has make some revision on the policy framework. Before the pandemic, it's only supply side reforms. After the pandemic, we call dual circulation. From my understanding, the dual circulation actually is a kind of more complicated policy framework. Not only include the supply side reforms, but also include the demand side consolidation. And also we find when we expand, we want to emphasize the demand side, then problems of the income disparity also are very significant. So income distribution is also include in the basket. Here I want to emphasize as a finalize for the dual circulation. It includes supply side, demand side, and also income distribution. And for these three dimensions, they are exactly corresponding to the textbook at the GDP calculation in terms of production, in terms of expenditure, in terms of the income distribution. I think in this way, for the economists, you could be much more easily to understand. So this is the domestic perspective of the dual circulation. And when the central government announced the dual circulation, I think that they emphasize more on the domestic circulation, that is the domestic demand, rather than the external demand. But in last year, in 2021, I think we just go to the wrong way. That is, the export goes too fast, while the domestic demand is too weak. So this will related to your second point, that is the inflation in China goes diverse between the domestic CPI and the external export good inflation. And you mentioned these two markets seems not so interrelated. I agree with you. But how to understand it from China's domestic view? I think I have just mentioned the reason, because China's macro economy has becomes tightened by the end of 2020, too early. Actually, from my view, it's too early to tighten the macro economy. While in the global markets, the American and the European countries, and including Japan, the major economies, they operate relatively expanded fiscal and monetary policy, and this is the reason why the inflation in China and other countries are so different. Actually, if you look at other Asian countries, including Vietnam and also other East Asian countries, including Korea, even Japan. All of the countries in the East Asian, we are not suffered so serious CPI inflation. This is quite different from EU countries and America, because all of these East Asian countries, their macroeconomy policy in last 2 years are relatively cautious, are not so expanded. But I think it's not a good way for China, because we are saving, we get more savings, and what our savings becomes the trade supplies to other countries. And now inflation, we got a lot of mountains of papers, foreign exchange rates, and it could be depreciated in the next following years. In China, actually, some of the price index are also go inflation, like a PPI. PPI are also recorded a 2-digit inflation in last year and in the beginning of this year. But because the residents, the household, they have a very bad, relatively bad expectation for their income and employment. So the household expenditure are relatively weak. So it's very difficult for PPI inflation to pass to the CPI. I think it's temporarily. It's also a kind of business cycle. So it's a short-term explanation. Okay, I think it is the time. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Xu. Firstly, I would like to ask Alicia, would you like to give some feedback or comments on Dr. Xu's comments on your comment? Oh.
Well, given that Dr. Xu is a friend of my best Chinese friend, Dr. Xu as well, I have very little to say because, you know, I know a little bit the thinking. But having said that, I think he has a very important point on the relevance of supply policies being somehow overshadowed during COVID, and in a way rightly so, because the type of shock that the Chinese economy is undergoing now is totally different from 2015. Yeah, it's the opposite basically. It's a demand shock, and thus it requires a different reaction. It's just that in my mind, dual circulation is a very structural, as I like very much what you said about a kind of a box where you put many things you can interpret in a way, in another way, as you feel fit. So that's a very it's a political concept. I think we should agree on that. And you know, we Europeans have many political concepts too, so don't worry. You made a big list before of all of our new concepts regarding, you know, like protection of our markets. I mean, this is not really about China, but it's very, very typical. But having said that, I think what I would like to add, and I said that at the beginning, but maybe not strongly enough, that this concept of dual circulation is based on the idea of you as an island, I mean, as an entity. You see, like, it's very, I mean, China is at the center, as many times in history, but at the center of this dual circulation, okay? So I think, again, the idea of a more hostile world is very important to understand this idea. It's not coming out of only out of China's own development, the themes. It's coming as a reaction, in my view, to a more hostile world. This is why it's so keeping the circulation. If you see what I mean, we need to keep on circulating. It's a very medical concept. And I think the reason is you want to protect, I don't want to call it protectionism. I want to say you want to check the hostile world and keep on working, keep on functioning. And in that regard, I think the concept that I developed that might sound very Western, and I'm sorry, eventually I am a Westerner, so I can't deny it, but of self-reliance needs to be understood not necessarily negatively. It's a reflection of a reaction to a hostile world. So you want to be self-reliant. And by the way, you may argue that the European concept of strategic autonomy, maybe we put it differently, but in essence, it's not very different. It's so, this is why we now call it open strategic autonomy to avoid the misunderstanding that we want to be more protectionist. But somehow I think, and I finish here, the whole world is struggling with this idea of protecting yourself from a hostile world. We all feel it's hostile, not only China, everybody, Europe too, the war, blah, blah, blah. So you want to protect yourself. At the same time, you want everything to remain the same. So you come up with dual circulation, things do not remain the same, though. That's the reality. So I just want to leave it there, and thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you for Alicia, your very timely feedback for Dr. Xu's reaction towards your opinion. I would like to say, Dr. Xu, do you want to give further feedback, further comment, or we can restart another round of discussion on different topic?
So okay, I want to again give some respond to Alicia. You have just mentioned China's dual circulation strategy is one to react to the hostile world and protect itself. I think many of the people, observers, not only of foreigners, but also in China, they understand in this way. But I join in a lot of discussion for the in policy circles. I think for the mainstream thinking are not in this way. Actually, for dual circulation, the stance of dual circulation is one of the key point is that we want to open more to the global market and integrated more to the global market. In March, I have communicated with the Russian economists in an online meeting. I asked the Russian economists that whether they have some experience for Chinese, because relatively Russia are quite successful to make a kind of closed economy or domestic circulation. They have their own network, internet network, and their own a kind of information system, which is the substitution of SWIFT and so on. But even the Russian economists, they told us it's impossible to be isolated and as an island. Even after the war, for the Russia, it's important for them to cut off the trade relation with EU countries. I think it is also a kind of consensus for the government officials in China that we could not be a kind of an island to isolate it from other economies. It's impossible for China. And since the year of 2018, China and the U.S. trade tension, China and the U.S. trade war was broke out at that time. Actually, you can find the financial opening, the pace of financial opening up is accelerate. I think you can feel it because Alicia worked in a financial company based in Hong Kong. You can feel significantly that China make great efforts to open the financial market. Much more efforts was made in last 3 or 4 years. since I have also published a book about financial opening up for China, you can find that even after the trade war, China has been very even more active and proactive to open up, to make open up. And now China is also applied to join in CPTPP and DEPA and many other treatments, including the RCEP has launched since the beginning of this year. Actually, for China, during the trade war between China and the US, China is relatively weak, kind of weak power compared with US. So what is better for China's choice is to be more integrated to the global market, not to isolate itself. And you have mentioned the 2025 China's manufacturing. Actually, this kind of plan since the beginning of 2010s is not important at all, because you know Professor Yu, our former director, he has been one of the major participants to join in to try to make the draft of 13th 5-year plan in 2015 at that time. And he told me, and he told his foreign friends that when they talk about the plan of the 13th 5-year plan in 2015, nobody have mentioned the 2025. And even for he as a major participant for the 5-year plan, he doesn't know 2025 until US and EU they criticize on 2025. Then I remember very clear in 2015 or 18, Professor Yu told me, he asked me a question, what is 2025? I told him, I don't know. I want to declare, to identify with some of my colleagues. Since then, we have no such kind of plan. But when China and the US, the relations got nervous, then some of the people, some of the group in China, they will argue that 2025 is extremely important for China because the external environment is not so friendly, no longer as before. So it's kind of expectation self-fulfilling. It's a pity, really a great. So I'm also I think it's better for both sides. It's not double win, double lose. I think we need a good timing and a good event, a good excuse to relaunch a new kind of better relationship between China and the EU and China and other countries. I think China and the EU's relation are completely different, fundamentally different from the relation between EU and Russia, because we have no fundamental conflict in security or other issues. We have more in more fields to cooperate. Okay, I stop here. Maybe too many minutes.
Okay, very, very good interaction with each other. Now we almost use out of the time. We have only 1 minute. So I can open to one participant to issue one question to the panelist. Then we will have to go to the next panel discussion. Everybody, every participant, do you have any question for our panelists? Nobody. Okay. So
Yes.
If
nobody have questions, I want to just show one of my my figure in my slides. I think it's also good to understand, maybe helpful to understand the dual circulation.
Okay.
Maybe just a few minutes. originally I want to show you 3 figures, but here I can show just one. I suppose you can see the figure. These 2 lines show us the foreign companies in China, their business model changes remarkably in last 1 or 2 decades. In 2006, the foreign companies, their export sales are 7 times as much as their domestic sales. So it's quite different. And in the year of 2016, for the foreign companies, the exports and the domestic sell to the global market and the sell to the domestic market is becomes equal, almost equal to each other. And then in the year before, in 20, the foreign companies sell in Chinese domestic market. It amounted to 1.4 trillion US dollar, which is much more than the foreign companies' export sales. It is around 60% for the domestic sales of their whole business in China. That means a lot. First, that means the foreign companies in China, what's important to more important to the foreign companies in China is domestic sales, domestic business, not export sales. And that means even when the US increased the tariffs against China, but for the domestic sales, foreign companies' domestic sales, it will be less impacted because they don't export for the major business. And the second is that the foreign companies will demand more reforms in the domestic market to the Chinese government. Because I discussed with the foreign companies many times, they will ask me questions like, what is dual circulation? I will show this figure to my foreign companies friends and say that in last decade, you have changed your business model in China. Now in China and for China strategy, it's a kind of, roughly it's a kind of domestic circulation, one of the dual circulation. Okay, that's my complimentary.
Okay, thank you for Dr. Xu. Gave a very good analysis for the dual circulation. Now we have to finish this panel, and we have a very nice discussion with each other. We find that we have a lot of policy instruments have been finished. So the think tank dialogue is very important to give a solution to how to deal with these finished policies. Also, we found that there are a lot of ongoing policy making. Even I can see the dual circulation is an ongoing project. Also, Dr. Chen gave us a new analysis on some ongoing project from EU. So I think this discussion even more important that we can give a policy suggestion for individual government, individual decision makers, how to perfect your policy to promote the good cooperation with each other. Thank you everyone, and thank you for your contribution for this very important panel discussion. We have to give the floor to the next panel. Peter. Hello.
Hello, Professor Liu. In the program, I can see that there is a 5 minutes refreshment break. Shall we have this small relax, or shall we move on with the program?
Okay. Good suggestion. We should have a.
Okay, then I suggest to have this 5 minutes break, and then see you back in 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay. See you later.
So I hope everyone had a good relax and is ready for the next section of today's event. My name is Peter Gorecki. I work as a senior analyst at the Institute for Foreign Affairs and Trade. And I think in the first session, we were listening to some really interesting presentations and we had a good discussion. And I'm sure that the second panel will also provide a lot of interesting points regarding the topic, which is practically the same as the topic of the first session. So we are going to analyze China's dual circulation strategy and its implications on Europe. The agenda of this second panel is similar to the first one, so our panelists will have roughly 15 minutes each, and then we will have a short Q&A session. So let me introduce the speakers of this panel. First, Mr. Chengyuan Luo, who is a professor at Fudan University, Ms. François Nicolas, Senior Research Fellow at and the Director of French Institute of International Relations Center for Asian Studies, Mr. Xiaosong Wang, who is a professor at Renmin University, and last but not least, Mr. Csaba Molditz, Director of Research at the Eurasia Center, John von Neumann University in Hungary, and he's also a non-resident research fellow at China-CEE Institute. So without further delay, I will pass the virtual floor to our speakers. In my agenda, I can see that Mr. Luo is highlighted as the first. So Mr. Luo, please go ahead.
Oh, Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
And you also can see my screen?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So many thanks for the invitation. Yeah, I'm very honored to attend the conference. Yeah, the title of my presentation is Export Slowdown and Economic Transformation in China. Yeah, slightly different from what the schedule suggested, but the information I want to express is the same. Yeah, especially the discussion of the first panel is very helpful for you to understand what I want to say. Yeah. So my presentation includes the following parts: research question, motivation, and literature, some very preliminary empirical evidence, and conclusion and policy implications. So the what we concern is how export slowdown affect Chinese economy. Regarding the motivation, you can find that since the global financial crisis, since 2008, actually export in China has declined, and the same for economic growth. You know that for a long period of time, Chinese economy quite depends on the export. So you can find that export growth rates and economic growth rates are highly positively correlated. So the export slowdown actually has dragged down the economic growth rate. Another issue is about the trade protection. Since 2008, actually trade protection toward China has become seriously. When Donald Trump took the office, the situation became worse. But even after Joe Biden took the office, the situation does not get better. And another issue is the pandemic, which also produces great negative impact on international trade. So China is also negatively affected. And also geopolitical tension is also a problem. On the one hand, Russia-Ukraine war is still going on. On the other hand, the competition between US and China actually becomes fiercer. So all these things, yeah, produce a great impact on China's export. Yeah, also produce negative impact on external demand. So from this figure, you can find that the trend of export dependence ratio in China. Yeah, in 2008, the ratio is about 33%. After that, this ratio actually has declined all the way. And in 2020, this ratio is about 19%. So in other words, yeah, China does not rely on, the extra demand as much as before. Or we can say, yeah, domestic market or domestic demand, yeah, becomes much more important. In this situation, so in the domestic integration actually becomes a priority of the government agenda. So in China, we have some experimental fields for domestic market integration. Yeah, Yangtze River Delta integration and Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, and the Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei integration. So this figure shows us some basic information about Yangtze River Delta, yeah, which consists of Shanghai, Zhejiang, Jiangsu, and Anhui. And in total, yeah, in coal area, it includes 27 cities. And the population accounts for 4% of the total in size. Yeah, Yangtze River Delta, yeah, accounts for 4% of the total area of China, and the population accounts for 15% of the total Chinese population, and the economy accounts for 1/4 of the GDP of China. And with respect to trade, yeah, it accounts for 37% of total trade of China. And in terms of foreign direct investment, yeah, it accounts for almost 40%. And the GHM Great Bay Area, this figure shows us the location and some other basic information. Yeah, it has over 70 million population in this area, and the economy, yeah, is over 1 trillion RMB. Yeah, and in laws, yeah, just as I said, we have Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei integration, and in inland, we also have some experimental fields for market integration. For example, yeah, we have a e-commerce road, yeah, between Chengdu and Chongqing. Yeah, all of them are experimental fields for market integration. So this figure shows us the situation of domestic integration. Yeah, so you can find that for the whole country, domestic market disintegration has been reduced. Yeah, the same applies to Yangtze River Delta and applies to Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei. So in some, yeah, markets, domestic market, yeah, has become more integrated than ever before. So our research, yeah, is related to the literature about the impact of economic slowdown or export slowdown. Yeah, most of the papers concerns the impact on labor market, especially employment effect and wage effect. So due to limited time, here I won't explain the literature in detail. So compared to existing literature, our work, has some marginal contribution. We concern how economic slowdown affects people's mental health, how economic slowdown affects entrepreneurship in China, and how economic slowdown and how export slowdown affects domestic market integration. So with respect to the first topic, our co-author paper will be published on an economic journal in China, China Economic Quarterly. We rely on the data provided of CFPS, China Family Panel Studies, and this is an empirical equation. The explained variable is a individual mental health, and the key explainer variable is a economic growth of a province or a city where an individual is located. So from this table, you can find some some baseline estimation results. You can find that mental health and economic growth rates are negatively and significantly correlated. And we use provincial level growth rates, and we also use city level economic growth rate, but the results remain the same. So in this study, we examine the impact of economic slowdown on mental health, and we use export growth rate as the instrumental variable of the economic growth rate. The estimation results show that economic growth has a significant positive impact on mental health, which means economic slowdown has worsened mental health in recent years. Our extended analysis suggests that the negative impact are stronger on rural, middle-aged and elderly and less educated population. And with respect to the second topic, we just finished a working paper, about how economic slowdown affects entrepreneurship. We rely on the same data source, and this is an empirical equation. They explain a variable is whether or not a person is self-employed. And the key explainer variable is also the economic growth rate of a person. And this table shows us the baseline estimation. We can find that economic growth rate and entrepreneurship are positively, are negative, and significant correlated in our IV methodology. So from this study, we found that economic slowdown actually has significantly stimulated entrepreneurship. And our extended analysis also show us that many rural residents, young people, low education, and married, childbearing are more strongly stimulated. With respect to the last topic, we concern how economic slowdown affects domestic market integration. Yeah, we also finished a working paper. Yeah, we rely on various issues of China's statistic yearbook between 1999 and 2019. Yeah, regarding the empirical equation, the explained variable is market segmentation in China or market disintegration in China. And the key explained variable is the export dependence ratio in China. And from this figure, you can find that again, yeah, foreign trade dependence, yeah, export dependence, both declined, especially after a global financial crisis. But market integration, yeah, actually is already on the way. So compared to previous period, yeah, domestic market becomes more integrated. So this table shows us the baseline estimating results. Yeah, export dependence ratio and the domestic market integration, yeah, is insignificantly correlated. But in our extended empirical studies, we find that in coastal areas, yeah, export dependence is positively and significantly correlated with domestic disintegration. So that means for coastal areas, when exports decline, yeah, these provinces are more actively to embark on integration with their neighboring provinces. And we also find that for provinces with a high dependence on processing trade, yeah, when export declined, such provinces are also more actively to embark on integration with their neighboring provinces. And we also find that for provinces with less, state-owned enterprises, yeah, when exports slow down, yeah, such provinces are also more actively to embark on integration with their neighboring provinces. And this table shows us the railway freight, yeah, inside a province and between a province and its neighbors, and between a province and other provinces. We find that when export declined, yeah, intra railway freight has increased. And we also find that when export declined, railway freight between a province and its neighboring provinces also has improved. So from these studies, yeah, we find that export slowdown and the resulting economic decline, yeah, have produced a negative impact on people's mental health. But at the same time, they have also stimulated people's entrepreneurship. What's more important, we find that export slowdown actually has pushed forward the domestic market integration. Yeah. But this actually has some, important policy implications. You know that in early this year, yeah, IFAT, yeah, has put into effect. Yeah, and China also has finished a negotiation with the European Union about CAI in late December 2020. And China also has decided to join CPTPP in September 2021. So a more integrated domestic market, benefits China itself, but also benefits China's trade partners. And a more integrated domestic market is also important for China to deal with the challenge brought by IPEF, which has been proposed recently. So this is a very brief introduction about what we have done regarding how export slowdown affects economic transformation in China. So thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Luo, for sharing all these research findings. And for me, it was very interesting to see that the transformation of the Chinese economy has been so drastic and quick. I mean, the data you presented, so the percentage of export in the Chinese GDP dropped from more than 30% to 18% in, let's say, 15 years. I think we here in the West simply couldn't realize that the transformation of the Chinese economy is happening so quickly. So thank you again. And now let me pass the virtual floor to Ms. Nicola.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for having me participating in this very interesting discussion. I will stick to the topic that was given to me, that is the dual circulation strategy followed by China. So my apologies if I repeat a number of things, a number of points that have been made in the previous session, which unfortunately I couldn't attend, by the way. So excuse me if there are repetitions. Well, my talk will be organized around three major points, or three major parts. I will start by, well, coming back onto this dual circulation strategy. So I will explain what I understand as the dual circulation strategy. Then I will comment a little bit on that, and precisely focusing on the implications for Europe and European economies. And I will end with some challenges that I see coming in the implementation of the strategy by China. So on the first point, what is this dual circulation strategy all about? As usual in China, there is a slogan that is floated and without much substance at first. And then over time, we've realized gradually what exactly the authorities have in mind. So it's exactly the same thing with the dual circulation strategy. So what I understand is that according to this new model, China really plans to emphasize both growing exports, which is the international circulation, as well as expanded domestic demand. So the two things at the same time. And this expanded domestic demand is powered by rising consumption. So this is the internal circulation. And the two, the internal and international circulations, are supposed to reinforce each other. So the idea, the way I understand it, is that expanding demand for Chinese products and exports, as well as domestic consumption, would support and strengthen China's growth and China's manufacturing base. So this manufacturing base being the real engine of China's development success. It has been the case in the past, and it will still be the case in the future. The reason why, again, the way I see it, the reason why Chinese authorities launched this strategy is that they perceive that they are faced with very difficult times, turbulent and unpredictable external environment. And the major concern is about China's reliance on other countries for a number of goods, and in particular for critical goods. I will get back to that in a minute. So a number of areas or sectors have been highlighted by Chinese authorities as being of particular concern. And these are in particular high-tech sectors, and well, microchips, for instance, semiconductors, etc., or integrated circuit, more broadly speaking. This is what led, according to my understanding, the Chinese authorities to launch this new strategy. So at the end of the day, what we have is a three-pronged approach. First of all, the dual circulation strategy aims to shield China from global volatility, and so to pivot to the Chinese economy toward more or higher self-reliance. That's a major objective of this dual circulation. So more autonomy based on internal circulation. This has, again, two facets, the way I see it. First of all, there should be more reliance on the domestic market, but there should also be more reliance on domestic technologies, domestic technological capabilities. So more self-reliance at the end of the day. But incidentally, this is actually nothing really new. This is the continuation of all earlier strategies, and in particular the Made in China 2025 strategy that nobody talks about too much today, but it is still in the air. And it was also this willingness to develop or to enhance self-reliance was also very much part and parcel of the 14th five-year plan. So all this is nothing really new. It's just repackaged and presented in a slightly different way. So this is a major objective, to develop this internal circulation, to develop self-reliance, and this goes both through development of the domestic market as well as development of domestic capabilities, technological capabilities. And then there is the other major objective, so it is third prong of the strategy, which is preserving some of the gains of globalization or from globalization. And this is the external circulation. Of course, I mean, China has benefited so much from globalization that it doesn't want to drop it. So it still wants to take advantage of this globalization, but it's only now part of the strategy together with the development of the internal circulation. So this is what I understand as the this dual circulation strategy. It's a combination of earlier strategies, but it's repackaged in a slightly different way. So a couple of comments about that, and in particular about the implications for European economies. Well, the first implication, obvious implication, is that the desire by China to develop its own capabilities, and in particular technological capabilities, to reduce the dependence on foreign technologies, will lead to a lot of interventionistic strategies or policies. There will be more interventionism to promote domestic technological capabilities. And this is likely to lead first to more competition for European companies in European countries. And this will also lead, or this is likely to lead to problems or tensions with European countries that are not too happy if there is too much interventionism. So there are potential frictions as a result of this strategy. There is more competition, but there is also a source of tensions or frictions regarding what may be seen on the European side as excessive interventionism. Interestingly, the willingness on the part of China to enhance its self-reliance is actually a concern that is very much present in the rest of the world. And actually what we see in this part of the world, I mean Europe, is to some extent exactly the same thing. There is also a desire to enhance self-reliance, technological self-reliance. So we do see that there will be frictions at the end of the day, because these two strategies will be in competition. So this may be a problem, but to be honest, what China is looking for is exactly what the EU is also looking for at the same time. So of course, I mean, this is a reason or a source of tension and concerns. In this respect, I think that the two parties perhaps overplay this the problem associated with reliance on external technologies. I think that dependence is not really the issue. The real issue and the real source of concern is the instrumentalization of dependence, because dependence is really part and parcel of the international economy. If you trade, well, you are to some extent dependent on your clients or customers or consumers, external consumers, foreign consumers. So dependence is part of the game. But the problem is when this dependence is instrumentalized or weaponized, this is really where the problem is. And the result of this situation is that we have some political considerations clashing with economic considerations. And today there is a very heavy politicization of the economy. And so as a result, well, we have more tension that should be perhaps in place. But we do have this problem. We have to acknowledge that there is a problem. The political considerations really trump economic considerations. And this may be at the expense of the economy. We may be trying to be more self-reliant and at the end of the day, less cost efficient. So there is really a problem here, but I don't think that there is much that can be done about that. It's just an observation that I'm making as an economist. And I just think that it's too bad in some cases that politics trumps economics. That's really too bad, because at the end of the day, well, we'll just lose on cost efficiency. Other comments about this dual circulation strategies. Well, another result is also that the technological competition is really the new battleground. And this is a reality that we observe on the ground. And as a result of this, there are rising pressures towards some form of decoupling. And this is the result of pressures coming from China and also pressures coming from the other side, and in particular Europe. I'm not talking about the US, but it would be exactly the same thing. And so there is definitely rising pressure towards some form of decoupling, which economically is not the ideal situation. It's not an optimal situation, but this is the result, again, of this politicization of the situation and of political pressures. What else? What did I want to say as comments? Oh, yeah, another point which relates directly to what has been presented in the earlier presentation. Well, I understand that the dual circulation is about internal circulation as well as external circulation. And as far as external circulation is all about, what China is trying to do is to push for some form of trade. I mean, trade is not dropped. There is no attempt on the part of China to disconnect from the rest of the global economy. But my impression, and this also results from what I just heard, is that there may be a turn towards, or more of a focus on Asia. China's participation in RCEP is such a sign, and China's participation in CPTPP, which is not, I know, exclusively Asian, but it's, trans-Pacific, is also a sign that China may be emphasizing other areas than the EU and the US, but then the EU, at least, which is what I am interested in. So the participation in both RCEP and CPTPP may be a sign that China is trying to turn, not to turn away from the EU, but at least to emphasize other partners rather than the EU. And of course, this is a source of concern for us, for Europe. My advice on this specific point is that the EU should perhaps consider also joining CPTPP. Why not? At least applying to CPTPP, which is actually the place where the new rules of the game are being defined today. So that's my piece of advice, but I'm not sure that anybody will listen to them. So we'll see in a couple of years whether the EU will apply to the CPTPP or not. And finally, some of the challenges perhaps to end on a more provocative note, perhaps. In this dual circulation strategy, I see first some kind of an inherent problem. I see really an inherent contradiction in the reasoning that underlies the dual circulation strategy. The first, well, the idea is that exports in China tend to be competitive because they are relatively cheap. So workers in the export sector have relatively low wages. This is what makes Chinese products competitive. And this is not really consistent with a strong consumption. If you want to have a strong consumption, what you need is, well, people who have enough money to consume, to domestically consume. And so there is some kind of a contradiction between these two things. If you keep wages relatively low, then people are not in a position to actually consume, at least not consume very much. So there is this this contradiction, and what we observe in China, what we have been observing over the past 20 or 30 years, is that there is very low consumption rates, among the lowest in history. And these very low consumption rates are the consequence of Chinese households retaining a very small share of GDP. And so they're badly paid, and so they retain a low share of GDP. And this is in contradiction with expanding the domestic market and expanding domestic consumption. So I really see some kind of a problem here. But perhaps our Chinese friends can explain to me that I'm wrong. Second challenge is today, it's much more related to today's situation. While China is facing a number of both structural and short-term headwinds, including, of course, COVID-19 outbreaks, and including real estate market troubles. So there are a number of problems, economic problems, that have nothing to do with the dual circulation strategy, but which makes the implementation of the dual circulation strategy much more complicated. So I don't know whether it will be possible to maintain this this strategy. I see a number of problems kind of hindering the implementation of the strategy, and in particular due to the pandemic. Well, China has to rely much more on its external demand, and this is not, well, this is easier said than done. Let's put it that way. And what we see is that in the very last years, China's growth has been supported by exports again, and we don't see, you know, the domestic consumption side of the strategy very much developing. So I see that as a further challenge for the implementation of the dual circulation strategy. On this very last point, again, my piece of advice, and this time to the Chinese authorities rather than to the European authorities, I think that there is really a problem for the development of the domestic market or domestic consumption. What may be needed is a deep reform of the financial sector. And I think that this is something that a number of people have been saying over the past 10 years or so. If you want the domestic market to develop, what you need is a better allocation of capital within the Chinese economy. And so what you need is for people to have more opportunities so that they, in the banking sector, in the financial sector, so that they don't have to save that as much. So a deep reform of the financial sector, I think, would be a very useful reform with a number of impacts, and in particular that would definitely help the development or the expansion of domestic consumption. And this is not yet the case. We don't see that yet. So I think that today the conditions are not yet met for the domestic market to fully develop. And I think the financial sector reform would be part of this, of a necessary reform. Okay, well, I guess I will leave it here, and thank you for having me again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nicola. You had several very interesting and valuable remarks I liked very much. And maybe I would only highlight one. You mentioned that not dependence is the main problem, but how countries instrumentalize this this dependence. And I really feel the temptation to raise the question. So to our panelists, so how do you see the chance that this dependency could be weaponized in the EU-China relationship? But I don't want to interrupt the panel now, so maybe we can get back to this point at the end. So I now give the floor to Mr. Wang. Please go ahead. Mr. Wang, are you here with us? Okay, if not, then maybe he will return later. Then
thank you, Peter.
Okay, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, thank you so much. I will share my screen.
We can see you.
Oh,
please
okay,
turn the camera on.
Thank you. I'm sorry. We use the cell phone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to take this opportunity to share my idea about China's dual circulation strategy and GVC participation. The main findings are as follows. Dual circulation strategy does not mean China will focus exclusively on internal circulation. Instead, it will strike a balance with external and internal circulation. In this paper, we construct a theoretical framework and find that uncertainty inhibits the export of enterprises, and participation in GVC can alleviate the negative impact of uncertainty. As a result, in the future, China should actively participate in the governance of the global epidemic, reduce the external uncertainty faced by Chinese companies, promote the participation of global value chains, that's GVC, to an efficient state. Achieve the dual circulation strategy. There are 6 parts in this speech. The first one is I will briefly introduce China's dual circulation strategy. The second part, I will show the trend of increasing uncertainty Chinese firms faced. In the third part, I will use a theoretical analysis to show that uncertainty has negative impacts on economic activity and trade, and that GVC may alleviate the negative impact of uncertainty. In the 5th part, I will show that embedding in GVC is an important way for exporting firms to cope with uncertainty and reduce external risks. In the last part, I will show some implications for China-Europe trade development. In the past couple of years, the anti-globalization trend in many countries has had a negative impact on China's external economic environment. For example, the United States has triggered a trade war against China and is intensifying conflicts in other fields, particularly in the field of science and technology. The United States even seeks to completely decouple from China. Gets worse and worse. That's why President Xi has emphasized the importance of the dual circulation development pattern, which is centered on the domestic economy or internal circulation and aimed at integrating the domestic economy with the global economy for external circulation. So the dual circulation centers on internal circulation, but it does not mean China will focus exclusively on internal circulation. Instead, it will strike a balance with external circulation. For example, by further opening up the economy to the outside world, which in turn will boost international cooperation and global economy. At present, China occupies an important place in global industrial chains, but given growing its economic strength and drastic changes in the I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Now Chinese firms faces increasing uncertainty. Since 2007, there have been many unpredictable events around the world. At the same time, in order to give priority to the development of the domestic economy in Western countries, trade protectionism continues to rise. The Trump administration has adopted trade protection policies against China, causing Chinese to face high levels of uncertainty. In 2020, the COVID-19 epidemic spread globally and the world economy fell into a severe recession with a long duration and uncertain future development prospects. Lots of scholars make models to measure uncertainty. We use the GDP of a trading partner country to measure a country's uncertainty and assume that the difference of a country's GDP logarithm follows first order autoaggressive progress, namely the AR1 progress as shown in the screen. So the export company predicts that GDP of its trading partner country consists of two parts. One part is the expected GDP in line with AR1 process, and the other part is the change in GDP caused by the negative shock. So the derived quantity is the magnitude of GDP changes of the target country. So this is the measurement of uncertainty. It can be shown from this figure. When China joined the WTO, the level of world uncertainty declined, and it rose sharply during the financial crisis and reached its peak in 2009, following the economic recovery of various countries after the financial crisis. The level of world uncertainty declined, but rose again in 2012, mainly due to the decline in commodity prices, the rise of trade protectionism. Next part is the theoretical model. I will introduce it briefly. Based on the theory of engineers and trade, the theoretical framework of our article mainly includes the demand side and the supply side. This is the consumer's preference. We use a CES utility function, and this is the intermediate good protection. It is a perfect competition market, and this is for the final goods production. It is a monopolistic competition market. Please note that the letter A means the economic condition of foreign country. It presents uncertainty firms faced. After a series of deduction, we will get the proposition of our model. That is, under uncertain conditions, the critical value of economic conditions for enterprises to enter the export market is greater than the critical value under certainty. And the critical value of economic conditions for enterprises to withdraw from the export market is less than the critical value under the certainty. This is for the effect of uncertainty on export. And the proposition 2 is that under uncertainty, whether the enterprise enters or exits the export market, the higher the degree of corporate GVC embeds, the lower the critical value of productivity. That is to say, participation in GVC can alleviate the negative effect of uncertainty on Chinese export. And next is the empirical analysis. In order to examine the impact of uncertainty faced by enterprises and the degree of GVC participation on the export scale, we will use this econometric specification. Among them, log X represents the logarithm value of the export scale of enterprises, and U is the uncertainty measured by GDP loss. And FVAR represents the degree of corporate GVC participation, that is the foreign added value included in corporate exports. I think I cannot explain the results in detail, just to make a conclusion. Uncertainty inhibits firms' export, and GVC reduces the negative impact of uncertainty. GVC plays a moderating role, mainly through product diversity, market diversity, cost saving, and quality improvement effects, rather than technology spillover effect. Uncertainty and GVC have significant impacts on product, market, and intensive margins. Uncertainty reduces firms' exporting growth rate, but GVC mitigates the negative impact of uncertainty. Uncertainty increases the volatility of firms' exports, while GVC decreases the impact of uncertainty. So the policy implication is that when there is no major unexpected shock, GVC is highly efficient and can alleviate the negative impact of external uncertainty. Therefore, countries should make a concerted effort to fight against the COVID-19 epidemic, making the economy return to normal and GVC efficient again. China will develop closer relations with the global economy in the future, but for that, the authorities need to further open up the economy to the outside world. In the end, I will give some comments about the future development of China and Europe. The global value chain connects China and Europe, and the two economies are inseparable. Since China and the EU imposed sanctions and anti-sanctions on each other last year, China-EU relations have encountered many challenges. Since the beginning of this year, with the changes in the international situation, such as the Ukraine issue, there are some new trends in the relationship between China and the EU. In the short term, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has led to some interruptions of China-EU trains, increasing the pressure on maritime transport and future increasing the maritime transport prices. At the same time, the rising commodity prices will raise Russian demand, which will adversely affect the economic recovery and the development of economic and trade relations between the two sides. But in the long run, regardless of the outcome of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, it will be difficult for Russia-Europe relations to recover. The transfer effect of trade and investment caused by the conflict may further enhance the development of China-EU economic and trade relations. In the future, China and the EU should strengthen dialogue and cooperation and promote the healthy development of bilateral trade. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wang. And as our time is flying, I immediately ask Mr. Mollitz to start his presentation. Csaba, please go ahead.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, as you wish. Thank you very much for having me on this panel. Thank you very much for the excellent organization. I'm in a lucky and unlucky situation because I'm the last one, and much of that what I wanted to say was already said, but still I like to somehow a little bit contribute to this discussion. So we can agree, I guess, that there's a consensus here that the signs of the overhaul and transformation of the Chinese economic development and goals have been there for many years. And as Alicia put, so there's a galaxy of words. I wrote the term buzzwords. So these buzzwords definitely help us to understand the direction the Chinese economy is heading to, but at the same time, so we should also look at the hard facts, not only the political part. And this kind of policy making is not new. Think of this term, new normal, for example, which was used to refer to a slower growth rate in the Chinese economy. So what I would like to do is to somehow a little briefly have an overview of these buzzwords, and there is one which was not touched upon by this discussion. This is the cross-cyclical economic policy. So cross-cyclical, a little bit of common prosperity, and at the end I would like to say a few words about the dual circulation strategy. So obviously the cross-cyclical economic policy cannot be defined as the opposite of counter-cyclical policy, this Keynesian-inspired policy. But it can be defined as a permanent tuning of the economy with many small steps, where stronger coordination of these steps and over the course of the years is typical. So in other words, in addition to economic boosting, which is typical for countercyclical policy, fiscal and monetary policy steps try to give, let's say, support, and this is a new element, to small and medium enterprises and labor-intensive sectors. So in other words, we could say that this emphasis is put on employment, or if we go further, so we could also say this emphasis is put on employment and increasing domestic demand. So the phrase taking action sooner in smaller steps and with a longer time frame in mind is something that how we can characterize this cross-cyclical economic policy. And last year, the annual Central Economic World Conference, which was held, if I remember correctly, last December, called for, and now I would like to quote the press release, coordinated fiscal and monetary policies and combined cross-cyclical and counter-cyclical policy adjustment, as well as the implementation of a strategy to expand domestic demand. I like this quote, I like this sentence, because you have all these elements there: cross-cyclical, counter-cyclical, even the coordination of fiscal and monetary policies. So we have, let's say, a strategy mix here. And that is very clear, as many pointed out. So the domestic element, the domestic part, or the internal loop or circle is more emphasized. But being more emphasized, it does not mean that we forget or China forgets the external loop, the external part. So if we really wanted to somehow rationalize and simplify the word instead or contrary to, I would like to use the word in addition or besides. Yeah. And I guess common prosperity is also an element, a puzzle, a piece, which also contributes to this refocus, overhaul, or of the Chinese economic development and goals. It aims to redistribute wealth in a more equitable way. I would like to add this part. So there's an irony of the situation that while earlier, I mean in earlier decades, unequal distribution of wealth in China was criticized by Western observers and analysts. And we can find justification for that. But now, sometimes, if you look at the headlines, the common prosperity is being referred to as a kind of return to Mao's China. So obviously, these steps are politically popular among average citizens. And because it is investigated, let's say, the accumulation of wealth with a strong focus on owners and managers of tech companies. And it's very, very rare that the Chinese president kind of protects the policy steps. But this year, the World Economic Forum, he said, and I would like to quote him, the common prosperity we desire is not egalitarianism. It's very clear. It's a very clear reference to this statement that it would be a kind of return to the 50s or the 60s. And he also said to the delegates, and now again, a sentence quoted, we will first make the pie bigger and divide it properly through reasonable institutional arrangement. As a rising tide lifts all boats, everyone will get a fair share from the development, and development gains will benefit all our people in a more substantial and equitable way. And yes, obviously, I know that it is difficult to measure the distribution of wealth. We usually use the Gini coefficient. And if you look at these numbers, 0.38 in China, 0.32 in Germany, 0.30 in Hungary. So you can find, let's say, countries where the distribution of wealth is more equal, and you can also find countries where the distribution of wealth is not that equal. For example, the United States would be one of them, where this efficient is 0.41. But what is the consequence of this campaign for the development of the world economy or for Europe? Domestic effect is that, and this is the plan, that the redirected money or wealth would be used to improve public services. For example, healthcare, pension system, the care of elderly people. Actually, this is one of the criticism of Western observers and analysts for many years. So this is these are parts where the Chinese economic system should be improved. And here you are. The international effects, in case this policy is successful, obviously, again, domestic factor of growth could be strengthened, and therefore the reliance on international trade could be lessened. So the link between domestic policies and the world economy is clearer when it comes to the strategy of the dual circulation concept, which is one of the priorities of the 15th five-year plan. And the idea was originally, if I'm correct, was brought up by the Chinese president in May 2020. Then a few months later, the idea was explained and repeated during his visit he made to Shenzhen on the occasion, actually, on the very famous sudden tour of Deng Xiaoping. And yeah, it was said the circulation is made up of two loops, circles, the internal one, the external one. The external loop shows the embeddedness of the Chinese economy into the world economy. And we can agree, so for an economist, this is not too much, because this description does not significantly differ from the way of how we describe modern open economies. Yeah, some analysts argued that the novelty of the approach lies in where the emphasis is put. So in this argumentation, the emphasis, or they say the emphasis is clearly put on domestic loop, but I agree with many of you who said that the real novelty is basically pursuing a more balanced economic policy. So what we could see in the cross-cyclical economic policy, what we could see in a more equal distribution of wealth, this is the same. It's a more balanced strategy where the demand and domestic elements are more underlined. Yes, there is a long road to go, because it's also ironic that the new slogans of the Chinese economy, again, dual circulation, common prosperity, suggest economic growth in China should be increasingly based more on domestic factors, by global demand for Chinese manufactured goods for exports is growing, and it still makes the net export a major driver of economic growth in China. So in 2021, China's global trade surplus rose to 676 billion American dollars, which was a new record for China and the highest ever for any country. So what we can see at the same time, so there are contradicting or forces that push China into the other direction. At the same time, this self-reliance, which was debated before, has become more important as, let's put this way, geopolitical conditions change, the trade war, economic decoupling, bottlenecks in the supply chains in the aftermath of the COVID-19 global pandemic, and even the realization of potential effects of economic sanctions. These are the lessons learned from the Ukrainian war, made China, and by the way, other players too, more alert to asymmetric dependencies, especially in the field of strategically important goods, software, chips, energy, and even raw materials. So partners looking for more independence can be found everywhere. So China is not special about that, but that there's also an element which we can discuss. What is the price of that? I mean, the price of that, if you look at the prices, I mean, whether you are willing to pay more or whether you can pay more for certain goods that were, let's say, that were produced in a more secured way. Let's this way, manufactured goods produced in Western Europe, whether you can pay for that or not. So there's, as Francois said, that there's a heavy politicization of economy. And this is my belief that in the long run, economic aspects will override political aspects, but not necessarily in the short run. And yeah, and obviously there is a technological competition, as one of the panelists said. I agree upon that. And the question, and it was also said that there's more interventionism, especially regarding technology. There's growing technology competition. Yes, but the European parties, the problem is that the European Union still cannot compete with Chinese companies, American companies, Japanese and Korean companies in these sectors, because simply in the core area, we don't have them, or we don't have the significant amount of these, let's say, technologically best players. And at the same time, we don't have a well-functioning EU-level industry strategy or policy. And this is because of the, let's say, because of the European Union, how it is made up, because of the institution. But I guess this is a topic for another discussion or for another conference. So if I wanted to summarize in one, let's say, in one phrase, what we can see in this case, in the case of China, and even in the case of the European Union, EU members, this is a kind of hedged integration where we are willing to cooperate still, but we would like to protect ourselves. That's why we have the hedged integration. And that's probably, that will be typical for the years to come. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Csaba. And if I take a look at the clock, I think we have consumed our time frame. So unfortunately, no time for a further discussion, but I know that this topic is so huge that we could sit here for hours and listening to each other's perspective. Maybe we could go on with that during a next event. Thank you very much for our speakers for sharing their knowledge and perspectives on this topic. And I think it's now time to wrap up the event. So I will pass the floor to Mr. Chen and to our Deputy Director, Tamás. Thank you again.
In what order? So am I to begin with? Okay, that's so then I begin with. So thank you very much for having this discussion today. I think it has been quite a long time that I was able to follow such a rich conversation of so hotly debated issues. I think it's very good, and it was the original objective to get past, to get beyond, the political and rhetorical surface level of those very complicated issues. And I think what you just did at this conference was really a successful completion of this task. So thank you. It was an honor to have it here, and it was an honor to listen to it. Although me and Director Ugrosdi, we are on the way actually, so it was a little hectic setting for this conference, for which we are commending our excuses, but still we were able to follow the gist of the conference, and it was okay, so I don't want to use very big words, but it was excellent in these terms. I think we've heard two very important debates, one centered around the economy and the other one more political. The very details of the dual circulation and its impact on both China and Europe was not only about this, but also how this dual circulation might actually work, how the policy aims of the dual circulation strategy are indeed fulfilled or not, and what about the future prospects. I think it was one of a kind in terms of an economic outlook. And I think it was very enriching, and I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to listen to. And the other one is no less important because it I think the very core of the problem is what is the exact proportion of economy and politics in dealing with those issues? What are their exact interaction? And I think we've heard some of the most innovative solutions in terms of academia, in terms of policy shaping, policy suggestions. I particularly liked the notions of how those economic issues were indeed securitized and politicized in this framework, in this discourse, and that this might be one of the key features that will remain with us for quite some time. But again, how long is this some time is also a question of debate, whether is it a long time this is a long-time phenomenon, a new normal, because we've heard opinions to this effect, but we heard other opinions to the effect that the politicization of economy is indeed important, but in the long term, the economic outlook will actually prevail over political ones. I think this is no doubt one of the most important and interesting questions of international politics and international political economy for years to come. And just one short comment on our last speaker, Mr. Moloditz, who said the hydrogen integration. I think this is again a very important contribution. Maybe this is something that we should elaborate on, and I'm not talking about this phrase only, but but actually everything that we've discussed or even touched upon in this past 3 hours, I think there is a lot more to discover. And even if the politicization of economy is the new normal, which seems to be the case, whether long run, middle run, or short run. But this is something that we have to talk about because during this session, I think what we definitely achieved beyond having a rich conversation was a better understanding of each other. And even though those phenomena constitute a part of the new normal, I think it gives us a task to tackle with those issues on our own level. And our task is to have a better mutual understanding. And based on this mutual understanding, to try to drift those structural processes more to a cooperative domain than a very, very much confrontative one, because that is in the interest of all of us, all of the participants. And I think this conference was a good beginning, and I really hope that there will be continuations as well. So without further ado, I think so I can settle with this wrapping up of the conference, but again, I really encourage us, all of us, to continue working together on those things. But at the last part, I would just grab the opportunity to say thank you for all of you who joined in this discussion and accepted our invitation, and especially thanks to our partner, the China-CEE Institute, and thank you for the organizers of this wonderful conference. Thank you again. Let's continue and have a nice day.
Yeah, thank you, Polane Tomasz. Thank you very much for your concluding remarks. I think we already had a very long and successful conference. I will not talk too much because I already had my talk before. My impression is that during the whole process of the discussion, even the topic is on Chinese concept, dual circulation. But still, there is always a question, the trust. So because everything is started from the word of trust. The business circle, they have the uncertainty, and after the politicization and different events, slowly they lose the trust or the confidence after that. And for the partners, they slowly lose the trust toward each other. But how and when it started, why they slowly lose the trust? I think this is utmost important. As I think Modis Chaba already expressed that I also like the concept, the hedged integration. In some extent, the dual circulation is a hedged policy. Not only from the outside strike or the uncertainty, but also try to stimulate domestic consumption. And but anyhow, the word trust is still no place in the bilateral relations, or neither between China, Europe, or between China and USA. And how to rebuild the trust. Now the pandemic made some problem for the traveling, where lack of the face-to-face discussions, and we have no chance to have thorough discussions. I think, and I do hope, after the pandemic, and we will try our best as think tanks and research institutions to try to make more activities and more conferences on the topic how to rebuild the trust. Because for the China, we think we are a peaceful power, and what we had been achieved is in a peaceful way. So I have a concept I used in another conference. I said, what China had been developed is based on the development, on the prosperity by development or through development. So I quote another concept using by the famous German figure, Erhard on the German social market economy. His book, the English version of his book, is titled "The Prosperity Through Competition." So Chinese way is prosperity through development. So we are a peaceful power, or we are a peaceful nation. So why and how we got to this such kind of uncertainty and lose the trust towards each other? So I think for the both sides, we need to have a sort of thinking about it. And maybe this would be the topic for the next conference between our two institutions. And the last, I would like to thank the Institute of Foreign Affairs and Trade, your wonderful support, and as also for our long time relationship. And you had invited excellent scholars from Europe, and we tried our best to invite scholars from China, also very excellent. And so thanks for all the participants, the speakers, and for your contributions. And I do hope in the near future, we will have the similar and maybe more high quality conferences. Thank you for all. I don't know who will be the moderator. Maybe, yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, maybe Professor Feng, you can announce the end of the conference.
I think we have had a very successful discussion. I want to congratulate to our two organizations for hosting this conference. I haven't say Nicholas, Professor Nicholas for many a long time. So it's a great pleasure to see all the old friends and new friends. We really cross our fingers from the end of the pandemic, and we'll see you soon. I hope in Paris, in Budapest, in Beijing. Shanghai just reopened again, and hope this is a good sign for the normal future. I just want to say hello, say goodbye to everybody. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to Paris.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.